Kia ora whānau, it is Lauren here from Chasing the Odd Shaped Ball. It's been quite a while. I know, I had every plan in the world to start travelling again, and then COVID-19 rocked up. So anyway guys, I thought I'd just do a bit of a kind of backstory just on a few things. I have been to Singapore and Japan in the last month, and I am currently actually right now in day 13 of isolation, which is the government enforced isolation for anybody who has been overseas in the last 14 days. But I thought I'd just do like a bit of a run through of just how things were when I decided to continue on and why I went on my trip to Singapore and Japan. Also, I will be doing a vlog about how I've dealt with isolation, what I have actually been doing, but I didn't want to show it too much today because I felt I just wanted to talk about my experience of traveling during the COVID-19 crisis. And yes, I'm going to admit that it wasn't probably a smart move, but in saying that, also with the way my government has actually dealt with this, I think travelling to Japan and Singapore right now was probably a safer option than actually staying here in Australia. I do want to also admit that the week that I was away overseas was probably one of the better weeks I've ever had on my travels. It was short, it was tight, it was pretty much what I needed to actually sort of take my mind off work, take my mind off a lot of personal problems I've got with my partner being away, and also with some other family problems we've got. But in saying that, also to go back to places like Japan, but also go to somewhere like Singapore as well, it was unreal, and I would do it all over again. The situation actually quite significantly changed whilst I was actually away. It come to a point where I was considering coming home early. However, the advice given to me was pretty much telling me that I have one day to go, so I'll just stay where I am. But I thought I'd just start now and I'll tell you my my story. So I booked these flights back in September, and I think the thing is that when it actually come to the whole COVID-19 situation coming out, initially I was kind of, it's okay, I'll just keep going and I'll see how things plan out. Within maybe about a 4-week period before I was due to leave, I had 2 flights rescheduled, and I sort of went, oh, maybe I should look at it and that. But then also on the other hand, the reason why I did continue to go on my travels was because my partner was actually going to be meeting me in Singapore. She was there to do some work. However, I was there to go on a holiday, and it just helped me to actually go see her because she's currently living in Israel at the moment. So I was just like, I'm gonna go because I haven't seen her in ages, and it probably might be one of the last times I see her for a while, because I wasn't planning to actually go to Israel until about October. So that was all good. So I had the flights rescheduled and I kept on going. So March 10 came around, I hopped on the plane, went to Singapore, didn't think anything about it. Got off the plane in Singapore, they tested my temperature just to see if I was well. I was fine. Entered Singapore, had a really great time in Singapore. So let's just check that out. So the next day I headed off to Osaka. I think the thing was is that at that time, again, it was pretty much the same as what I've been doing already before. And I will admit that at this time, Singapore Airlines were really lovely. All of the people on the plane, as in the staff, were all wearing face masks and gloves and things like that. So I felt more protected by that. So I went up to Osaka and I got into Kobe around about midnight that night. So I went off to Sukiya and I actually ended up having a meal at a restaurant, and it was still quite actually crowded. But the thing was is that I noticed that it was still business as usual in Kobe. People were actually leaving at midnight to go home after they'd been out to an izakaya bar with their workmates, which is quite common in Japan, especially during the week. And I just felt it was business as usual. The next day I went down to Chinatown, and that's when I started to notice there was a lot less people than it actually usually is. And it was the same in Singapore too. There was a lot less people than out, and it was actually really dead. It was predominantly locals or Japanese tourists, as in the ones who've come in from other parts of the country. On the other hand, that in the entire time that I was in Kobe, and I was out for 2 out of the 4 days I was there, but in the entire time that I went out and did things, I saw 4 tourists, 4 Western tourists who had travelled to Japan, and we had spoken and they were concerned just as much as me. But I'd say on the Friday, it was probably around about then that I started to get quite concerned. I was on the ABC News website, the Australian ABC News, not the US one, but the Australian ABC News website, and they have like a live stream where you can actually watch news whilst over the internet rather than actually having a TV. And a press conference come up with our good friend Scummo, Scott Morrison, and he had put out saying that there will be travel bans happening, there'll be restrictions happening, and also at the other end of the spectrum, New Zealand was also doing the same thing as well. They introduced a 14-day quarantine on the Saturday, and I kind of went, oh shit, I hope I don't get stuck in quarantine, or I hope I can get home. It was the Sunday, and the Sunday I went out to Nunabiki Herb Garden, and this is where things had changed. I went out there, I was filming, as you guys can all see here, and I had a really, really good day. And it was a really good day. It was a bit windy and a bit cold, but I had a really good day. Once I got down to the bottom station at the Herb Garden, I went to a 7-Eleven to have lunch. And I got a text message from my brother. Now, my brother had been calling me all week saying, what the hell are you doing in Japan? There's a lot of, there's a virus going on, and texted me and says, what are you going to do? Because you need to go into isolation. I went, freak. Now, he had this impression that because I have to go into isolation for 14 days, I need to be separated from my mother. Now, my mother's got health problems. She's got health problems of her own. And I said to him that we've already made an agreement that I'd still come home as per normal. I had to ring mother, look, confirming everything. I've got to go into isolation as soon as I came home. Rang my boss, and my boss was really lovely. So I'm really appreciative of my boss actually giving me the opportunity to come home, do my quarantine for 14 days, and then I actually head back to work on Wednesday, which is in 2 days' time. So a few things have changed since I actually was at the gardens just now. I went out to go have a bite to eat, got a message from my brother saying that, are you going to be okay with self-isolation? I was like, oh, what the? Anyway, as it turns out, the Australian government's just announced that I have to do 14 days in quarantine when I go home. So, not ideal. No, it's not ideal, but it's 2 weeks off work. I think that's probably a bonus sometimes. But I've worked it out with my boss. He's okay with it. He completely understands from my point of view, because I'm not happy, because I obviously want to go back to work and become a productive member of my team. But yeah, they're very understanding about what's happening, and obviously it was not very ideal to actually happen to me. So I left Osaka Sunday night, and I went back to Singapore Monday. I arrived in Singapore at a really optimal time, because I landed in Singapore at 5:30 Monday, midnight Monday heading into Tuesday. That's when Singapore was actually going to be introducing 14 days quarantine for any overseas passengers, irrespective of their citizens, residents or not. I came in at optimal time, so I didn't actually have to do a quarantine. I just left on the Tuesday morning. The Tuesday morning came around, I flew home back to Australia. I get back into Australia at about 5 p.m. A doctor comes on board to check out a passenger who had complained that they were not well. They were taken off the plane. I sort of spiked up and went, shit, I hope I don't, because I've been sitting basically 2 rows in front of this person for the last 8.5 hours. I'm hoping I don't get sick. Thankfully that actually hasn't happened. It's day 13 and I actually have presented with no symptoms so far. But in saying that, once I got off the plane, we were given a sheet of paper which we actually had to write out our name and address on, and basically a declaration to say that we were going to self-isolate for 14 days. My mother came and picked me up and I basically went into isolation for 14 days. Now, currently right now, I'm in my bedroom. This is where I've pretty much set up home for the last 14 days. I've gone outside to the toilet and the kitchen and done, you know, and shower and done like what needs to be done. But as I've said, it is day 13. I have not presented with any symptoms so far, which is a bonus. The only downside is I've actually got a nasty kidney infection, and being in isolation has posed its problems. As much as I have to go out and get my mother to actually go and get my groceries for me, the other thing is that being sick, unfortunately, people really don't want to touch you, and that was actually a big, huge thing that we had on Saturday. I eventually got someone to come and treat me, but that's a huge problem because kidney infections can turn septic. Eventually I got antibiotics. I'm doing a hell of a lot better than what I was on Saturday morning, but I think there needs to be more guidelines and more kind of clarity over this because the government hasn't been really clear on this, and this is why we got this big problem of 20,000 people rolling up to Bondi Beach last week. This is why we've got this problem where people are rolling up to other beaches and other places where they shouldn't be there. And it's a huge problem because we're trying to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So this is what we are trying to do. So I would just like to say that for the interim, there probably won't be any updates about my Japan series or my Singapore series for a while. I feel that it is not the right tone to actually be putting out travel vlogs out. We're not promoting travel right now. We're telling people to stay home. And I feel that right now, if I start promoting travel, it just gives people the wrong idea. And I feel that I'll probably start putting these vlogs out maybe about July. And I feel that that's when I'll start actually putting out more videos about what to see and do in Brisbane, hopefully. If we can all band together. My plans for 2020 are now completely out of the water. I was hoping to go to Melbourne in a couple of weeks for the Crusaders game. Super Rugby has now been suspended for the rest of the year. Also, I was hoping to go to Dunedin to go see the All Blacks play against Scotland. We still don't know whether or not the All Blacks season is going to go ahead. We still think that it might be the same thing that's actually happened to Super Rugby, where it might be suspended for this year as well. Also, I was planning on going to Israel in October, which I mentioned before, and that's now not going to happen. At the moment, it is actually, there's a complete travel ban on Australia, whether it's international or domestic, which means that I can't travel anywhere right now. So until these restrictions are lifted, I can't go anywhere. I am hoping to go to Malaysia, Singapore and Chinese Taipei or Taiwan in hopefully 2021. Israel is obviously a big thing that's on my list to do in 2021 as well. So fingers crossed we can actually go there, and I'm hoping to show you guys more of my travels for rugby as well. Until we've got a clearer answer about how to deal with COVID-19, chasing the odd-shaped ball is now going to be vetoed for another year, it looks like. And it's not obviously ideal, but it actually has happened, and I will actually come back to you hopefully sometime late this year. Alright guys, have a great day wherever you are in the world. It sucks that this has happened, I will admit, but I'm just hoping that you guys can understand from my point of view, being here in isolation where this has happened to me, and telling you about my story with the isolation and my concerns whilst I was traveling to Asia during the COVID-19 crisis, that you guys get a clearer picture of how serious it can get, and hopefully in the next few months we'll actually be able to do some more things. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this vlog. If you really like what you've seen, make sure to like this video and also subscribe to my channel. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Alright, kakite! Bye!